This is Beyond the Barracks, a podcast about the many and varied journeys of Australia's ex-service men, women and their families, brought to you by RSL Victoria.
In each episode, we'll interview a guest, sometimes two, about their life in service and life after service, exploring the many highlights and challenges that they may have faced along the way.
Beyond the Barracks is a podcast for veterans and their families to tell their stories. Sometimes we may discuss experiences and issues that some listeners may find distressing. Please check the show notes for support services.
We acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. RSL Victoria and the Beyond the Barracks team recognises the service of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, just as we recognise the service of all Australians. We are proud of the contribution they have made and continue to make to the Australian Defence Force. Well, Ailes, how did I let you rope me into this, interviewing my wife? What's the go with that?
It had to happen between the two. I've known both of you for about 5 or so years, and I always knew there was a story to be told. And Danielle, your lovely wife, is as important in your journey as your own personal story is.
Yeah, a great reminder that we probably don't acknowledge the partners of the men and women who serve enough. And I definitely couldn't have done it. It's a platitude, but it's true. I couldn't have done it without her.
I'm very excited to hear Dan's side of the story. Yours is quite well known. It's out there. It's in a book.
Yep.
This is Danielle's voice, her story, her side of events, and I think it's just so important we shed light on the other half.
Definitely. No, I'm looking forward to it, really.
Hey, Dan.
Hey,
Thank you
Els.
for joining us on Beyond the Barracks. We've got to come clean early on. Danielle, you are Harry's wife.
I am.
Take me back. When did you meet Harry, and was he already serving?
He was already serving. I met Harry in 1992, September 1992, in an office-type bar in the Perth CBD in West Perth.
Mm-hmm. What was the attraction?
Well, his attraction was to my friend. I think he was attempting. I think she was his initial focus, but we ended up talking and got on very well. So and the rest, as you say, is history.
Is history. When did it come out? Was it pretty early on in that meeting that Harry was in the military?
No, it wasn't. He initially told me he was a florist. And he even gave me detailed instructions on exactly where that florist was. And I knew that there was a florist there, but it sounded a little bit too a rehearsed response. So I called him out on that pretty early. But of course, I had no idea what the SAS was, what they did. So, yeah, it was a learning journey from there.
So was that a planned sort of pickup line, so to speak, Harry? I mean, you couldn't reveal what you did really.
You could absolutely reveal what we did, but we used to like to think that we were secret. No, it was a little bit of fun, and I have a memory that I said SAS, and I think your initial thought was SES. That's kind of, but maybe that was just my perception. But Dan certainly didn't kind of SAS. What's that? So and people used to get it confused because it was quite secretive. But no, I think I concur with Dan's recollection.
And once you did sort of wrap your head around the concept of SAS and what the demands were on him and his role and deployments and all that sort of stuff, was it off-putting at all, or in fact more of an attraction?
I led a pretty busy life. I was working part-time. I was at uni. But at that time, the unit wasn't operational. So for me, all it was he went away for really long periods of time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, on exercises back then. So it wasn't until 2001 that there were actual real deployments, I guess, from my perspective, so to speak.
And it wasn't in the press, or it wasn't well known then, was it, outside more publicly?
No. The unit had a pretty low profile. Back then people knew about it, but it's sort of something that has always sort of Perth's always been quite protective of the unit, and it's not talked about a lot. Everybody knows it's there, but given there was no actual war on at the time that we were involved in, there were obviously little secret things that were going on, little operations, but nothing at that point that Harry was involved in. It was just exercise out in the bush, one after the other. That was about it.
Yeah.
And at what point did your relationship become more serious? And was it then that you were sort of integrated into, I guess, that concept of being the military partner, the military spouse eventually when you did marry?
I, to be honest, I actually felt more like a band spouse rather than because Harry was playing in a band as well at the time. So that for me was probably more of an identity to me than the unit, because the unit was just sort of the army. It was, if I'd said to somebody most of my friends I think knew that Harry was in the army, and I think that's about it. They didn't really know too much more. I mean, I'm pretty sure my parents didn't really know too much more, and also, you know, our last sort of real war or wars having been sort of Korea and Vietnam, that was about it. So
It's a good point, because the regiment wasn't known, and even in Perth, there was only a few people who were interested in go poking around and find out a bit more about the SAS, but that was good. That was good for the unit. Now, in a lot of ways, what's happened recently is it's coming out into the front pages, etc. Has not been great for the unit. But, I'd agree with that. And you know, when I was home, I was playing with the band, and then which turned into the cricket club later on.
You've had so many other interests outside of your service.
But Dan kept me grounded through all of that. That's one thing. The initial attraction was probably me. I remember coming out to her little apartment in South Perth there, which I loved. And I'd come out drunk 1 or 2 in the morning and get a handful of pebbles and throw it up to her window and wake her
romantic.
up. I was very romantic, and I had a sense that Dan was a high intellect, and it was really challenging to me in that respect, and I was really drawn to that, and she's really helped me shape who I am today. I'm really, from that perspective.
Because I guess for you, Harry, as well, as much as, you're a brave man, you go out, you do everything, but, it's nice you come home to a supportive wife, a supportive family. How important is that?
No, I don't come home to her. I meet her down the pub and then she takes me home.
Yeah, that's it. But just going back, what Harry just said was really interesting. For me, the key measurement point for sort of how well known and how profile the unit was at the time was when Harry and I were courting. When we were dating, I would often go to the unit because there was a pub on there to the actual barracks. And just to give you an idea, at the time it was just a wooden boom gate, and any of us could just walk up to the person that was on guard duty in the guard room and just sort of say, "Oh, hi. I'm here to see, Harry, is he around?" And they would let us through. Whereas in contrast now, it's very, very different.
Secure.
You can't go on there at all. It doesn't matter who you are if you don't have, the correct credentials and ID and
security checks and
absolutely. It's so that sort of gives you an indication of how different things were.
It's changed
back in the early 90s. Yeah. Yep.
And here at Beyond the Barracks, we're very much interested in understanding the role that the spouse has in someone who serves life and what that looks like from a practicality point of view. And I guess it eventually happened that Harry did deploy. I mean, he's completed 11 active service deployments in his career. What was that like the very first time he left?
From memory, I think it was August 2002. Sounds about right.
Yep.
And it was really scary. I remember feeling sort of thinking, oh, this is all just a bit dramatic, because I'm not a a sort of person that gets too caught up in those things. But at the time, I remember reflecting on it and thinking, this is actually a really big deal. He's going to war for the first time. You know, what's he thinking? You know, how am I going to cope with him being away? I'm going to be worried about him all the time. And while it was scary, it was scary, worrying. I was worried about his safety. The actual home practical side of it, once you get into a routine of how things work for you, as you know, most parents know, that part of it wasn't too bad. It wasn't until sort of a few deployments in where you start looking back on previous deployments and the things that went on that I realised that he was actually missing, like significant things that probably didn't feel like significant events at the time, but looking back over them, they were things like school graduations and, you know, not, school concerts and things like that, you know, normally we'd sort of be arguing over who was actually going to have to go. I went last time. But yeah, those sorts of things when you look at them, but probably more when other people comment, that's probably you think you're actually doing okay and everything's all right, and then people will say to you, oh, must be just awful with him away all the time, and sort of go, well, it's actually not that bad. It's worrying, and but obviously after long periods of time and many deployments, it starts to change a little bit. Of
course. And even for you, Harry, when you had Dan in your life, did that change how you viewed your deployments as well? It wasn't you as a single man going away anymore. You had responsibilities and priorities on the home front too.
I took great comfort. You know, one thing Dan won't say, because she's too humble, is she's fiercely independent and very organised and a very clear thinker. So through all of that uncertainty and ambiguity, Dan just has a great gift to be able to unpack and think through those things really clearly. So I actually went away very at ease. I knew I'd miss her, but I had a sense of purpose, and I'm a pretty driven guy. We both are. Both of us are very driven in our own ways. But I had a great sense of comfort. You know, I've got this wonderful woman at home. By that stage, we've got 2 kids. I knew I'd come back to something great, and almost the day after I left, I'd start missing it. But all of that said, big job to do, plenty to do. So you just compartmentalise that. I never worried once, I don't think, in any deployment that I had any concerns that things wouldn't be okay when I came back, and our kids are in great hands. So, I think we're really lucky in that regard. We probably don't say it enough, but we're both lucky to have each other in that regard. But it was a pretty bizarre, crazy kind of deal, wasn't it?
When you look back on it now, it is funny. Excuse me, that Harry says he went away and he felt comfortable and confident that everything was okay, because one of the internal conflicts for me was always what to tell him and what not to tell him. So you sort of go like, say one of the kids hurts themselves or does something wrong, or because the whole time my responsibility is also to sort of protect him from some of that stuff that's going on, because the more he can concentrate on his job, the more likely he is to come home alive.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long before operators and service people in general were being killed. But yeah, that was, for me, that was always a big conflict. And there were lots of things that, and some of the things are sort of the serious behavioural things, getting suspended from school, or, how much do I tell him that? And then at the same time, I don't want him to tell that child off, because that would be hard. So,
well, except for the time when I got home and Henry had been in jail for 6 months. No, only joking. But tell me, what was it like when you're at home and you're seeing the war on television, and you're not only seeing Australian, but seeing US soldiers, you're seeing death and destruction through the television. How's that making you feel and impact on the kids? And
that wasn't great. I tended to not have the news on. So when I'm at home now, I have, I'll have the ABC on throughout the day and check in and things on it. But when you were away, I didn't. Probably more in sort of around 2003, 2004, they started, I'm not sure why. Ailes, you probably have a better idea, but more vision started coming on TV, I think particularly with Iraq. When you went to Iraq was probably the worst time, I think. Also maybe because of the age of the kids as well, like they were starting to put things together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think perhaps at around about that time our kids moved to schools, or our elder daughter Georgia moved schools to a school that didn't have other military kids in at it, whereas before then Georgia was at a school in Swanbourne that most of the kids there, or no, probably half of the kids there were defence kids from the Marity Patch where we lived. So she was sort of out of a sort of safe zone a little bit. So,
and what were the conversations like with the kids then around that time? You know, were they asking questions? Or were you starting conversations?
Yeah, Georgia definitely was. Henry not really so much. He was sort of did his own thing. But he did sort of as he got older. But yeah, definitely conversations, and also conversations in my workplace as well. Like people, as a teacher, I would have a lot of students asking me questions. And actually probably one of the most challenging things was at that time Australia had started accepting a lot of Afghan refugees. So the school that I taught at in Perth had an intensive English centre. So a lot of our students in that centre had come, you know, from Afghanistan. So there was always a little bit of internal conflict there as well, teaching some of these students, but never in a bad way, always in a...
Because I was going to say, I mean, during all of this, you very much had your own career path as well. So you were mothering, you were teaching, and on top of it, being a supportive partner to what Harry was out there doing. How did you juggle or make sense of, I guess, the societal judgment of war and what he was doing overseas? Was there any of that you were confronted by?
Yeah, there was. No, I don't recall anybody saying anything to my face, but there sometimes was a sense. Occasionally I would get an older student that might have been a little bit politically active making comments if they knew, because a lot of the students knew what Harry's job was. But I had the most amazing department support in the learning area that I taught at. An amazing head of learning area. All the staff that I worked with, the other teachers, were fantastic. They all had a little role to play in some way in getting us through that period, I guess.
Yeah, they become really close friends. And again, you know, I that just added to my comfort. You know, one thing it really switched me on to as I started to take senior leadership roles is managing soldiers and their welfare at home, their connection to home, because so many marriages do break down, and you know, and they're through silly decisions and misadventures and you know, misalignments and all the usual fare. But I always felt that if a soldier was unhappy at home or there was discord, that's when they were probably the most distracted. So you don't need that when you're flying into kind of, you know, dangerous situations. So, you know, I had a sense of that early from our accord and our how I felt things were, you know, almost entirely, but for the most part, quite stable and you know, I think we had great confidence in each other.
Yeah. It's just amazing to me to think, I mean, you were talking about almost that concept of life and death and sheltering Harry from information at home. I mean, I contact my husband multiple times a day to have a whinge and a moan about the kid's done something.
Oh, don't worry, there's a little bit of that as well. It's not all bloody all paintings.
Take a leaf out of the book, I think.
But I used to say, and it morphed over time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was letters in the mail.
Initially, we still have some of those old letters.
Yeah, and then which is great. I've read them, and they're lovely. They really are soldiers to their partners.
Their
love
love.
letters.
Yeah.
Remember, we only get one phone call a week or something, and then you'd be gone for 4 weeks, and then you come back. and you'd have a trail of soldiers just lining up behind this one landline phone,
Waiting.
and you could hear on some of the guys would be on the phone, and their wives or their partners, because women there as well. You're having an argument, and because it's frustrating at home. And the insight there is, I'd go, wow, Dan's putting up with, we had a challenging son, a beautiful, challenging son, and he's a beautiful, beautiful man. I hope he's listening.
And a daughter who had her moments
and
as
a daughter
well.
who had her moments, but she's pretty perfect. No, only joking, Henry. But listening into wondering, Dan's under the pump as well, because it's all stress and realities relative to your situation. So
and the other little thing that I always found really challenging, especially as the kids got older, is Harry would want to talk to the kids when he called. And sort of in later years, the calls became more frequently. They had more access to phone calls and things like that. But one of the awful
used to
things.
Say, why didn't you call me last night?
Yeah,
I'm at war, mate.
Exactly. Yeah. Always
Bit busy.
Always threw that one in there. But one of the worst times was he would ring and want to speak to the kids, and the kids were busy and they were doing stuff. And there was a TV. They'd been at school all day. There was a TV show they wanted to, sort of watch. And so sometimes Harry would ring and want to speak to Henry, and he'd be on his Nintendo DS, and he'd just be sitting there on that, and I'd be trying to sort of, without saying anything, signal to him to put it down. You're hurting Dad's feelings. He's trying to talk to him.
Yeah. How you going, mate?
Yeah.
What? How's your day been? What?
What did you do? I went to school. What did you do at school? I don't know. Schoolwork,
Yeah.
And even Georgia sort of got a little bit like that at the end. It was
It became like just common fare, didn't it?
Yeah. Because, that's how a conversation is, I think, in every average family around the dinner table. What did you do at school today? Nothing.
Yeah.
But I feel like the pressure almost because of those phone calls, they were precious moments with you and your kids.
Yeah, you felt a
being
bit
away
ripped
from
off.
home.
Yeah. If you weren't careful, you could overanalyse that. But sure.
But you understood that,
of course,
the kids had only, they might have only been home for, an hour. And
What probably hurt more, and not hurt, but what at the time I loved receiving letters from them, or some goofy drawing they'd done at grade 2 or whatever, and they started to dry up towards the end, and I got a lot of them early on, and you pin them up, and you come home from, I don't know, 4 weeks away in some cases. We did 50 or 60-day patrol in one stage, and we were fighting most of the time. And
4 weeks away from the base in Afghanistan.
There is no, it wasn't like Baghdad where I'm trucking around Baghdad one up on. I've got my own mobile phone. I'm texting you and say, hey, just going through this Sada City.
Oh gosh, yeah, right.
The guy was killed there, and but or calling you, I think, at one stage. But yeah, so you get home and there's all the letters have accumulated up on your bed, and you see guys, grown men, cry, when they open their kids' letters, and so we didn't see much of that. It become normal place, like, oh, better send Dad something,
Yeah,
by that stage, Dan was just moving more alcohol into Afghanistan than Carlton United.
Absolutely, I was quite good at that.
What was the readjustment like every time Harry came home again? You'd
Hell,
been solo
Aileen.
parenting, and then suddenly dynamic shift.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was always really difficult, like the first week especially, because Harry would want to come home and be, fun dad, but that it was often in the middle of the school term. It was like, no, there's no fun dad. The kids have got school in the morning, it's a routine, all of those sorts of things. But
we got better at that.
We did get much better at that. But Harry would also, especially if the breaks between deployments, if he knew they were going to be quite short as well. There was one, I think, where you came home for 2 weeks, and another time he did this holiday Olympics, and it was, it was
work out well.
Sounded fun, but it was just too intense, and we were staying here, and then we were going horse riding, and
George
then
was almost killed horse riding. You and I were arguing the whole time.
Yeah, we bickered the whole time, and it was, but it was just this sort of thing of trying to sort of squeeze in as much time, overcompensating. Yeah.
And for you,
we got better at it. And again, Dan's guidance and kind of built. We need routine, and And so we built over time a really good routine for going away, and I would encourage anyone who's going on their first deployment, sit down and talk about our routine and borrow this if you will. It's pretty basic. It was fish and chips down at Freo, walk around with an ice cream, go home, read it, just quite normal, but every time that was the thing. It's kind of the departure, priming for the departure. And then when I came home, I mean, it was potato, lamb chops and mashed potato and broccoli, and the kids didn't like that so much. But there was just an understanding, and I think the earlier you can do that, the better. Otherwise, you do overcompensate. And the holiday Olympics were a disaster.
Yeah, it's unnatural then, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. It is really. You're absolutely right. It was very unnatural, and having sort of like these celebratory dinners and like farewells and homecomings sort of almost made it less normal. Whereas if we sort of just did what we always did, it became sort of a little bit normal. I guess
that's a key takeaway, Dan.
Yeah.
I think for young families that are going through this, and the husband or the wife or the partner who's going away, don't go for big fanfare. It's exciting and you're drawn into that, and you want family. Everyone you want to see. You might want to talk about the boundaries for families as well. But whatever you do, maybe save the last week just for yourself. And I mean, one of the things I loved so many times used to drop me off at work, and the kids would be in their pajamas, and it was just actually I thought dropping off at work was really good, because the kids would go, oh, Dad's just going to work, and that leaves the narrative open for them, rather than, oh, Dad's gone, and tears on the steps.
Yes, this awful thing, yeah.
Well, I think the first deployment, I remember that one being the first time you ever went away in August 2002. It was a little bit like that. There was I remember it being early morning, the kids were in their pajamas. I might have this completely wrong, and there was some sort of bus. So it was all this dramatic sort of wave to a bus. I don't know. You might even remember.
I know what you mean, and no one was looking over my iPods on by that stage.
Yeah, exactly. But, there was sort of this, Georgia was crying, and then because Georgia was crying, Henry was, I'm going to cry too. And,
started,
all I was like, am I going to get home to get ready for work in time and get the kids to school?
To get the day started.
Yeah.
Harry just touched on a little bit about boundaries, about family. I'm interested to hear more about that. What do you mean?
It could get a little bit tricky. So it's sort of sometimes everybody wants a piece. So it was sort of this everybody wanted to be the last person to say goodbye to Harry if he was going away. Right. So, and we worked that out pretty early, didn't we? We would sort of go like the week before and the week after, like the week before he was leaving and the week after he got home was sort of like an off limits thing. Although sources have told me that on more than one occasion, Harry may have stopped off at Applecross Cricket Club
once
on the way home.
But that was like by rotation 8 or 9.
Yeah,
and I thought, Dan won't care. I think she's in bed, so I'm going to the cricket club on the way from here. I'll get my own cabin.
It's Thursday night selection. I can get there and heckle.
I've been waiting forever. I'll see. I'm home with you for the next week.
If I'm there on that Thursday, I might get picked for Saturday. Right. Yeah,
but the boundaries, probably my family. And they never overstep the mark, but they're very keen to see you. And I think, again, the routine that Dan's put up around, the transition period, again, we learnt it late. We weren't perfect at it to start with, but it is a takeaway. And, my family were on notice. I'd say to Dad in particular, he would, I'd say, give us a few days, mate, and he respected that, and I think that's fair. And the other thing, I was probably the biggest disruptor out of everything, as Dan's already alluded to. So I feel like I got better at that as well. Yeah. Dan's a home person, and the kids are too. I think they're not into fancy stuff. So we just hang out, and I think we were pretty good at it by the end. And so we should have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a huge component in your story about fact that in your story, absolutely, that in 2008 there was a significant event. You were wounded in action. Dan, I just can't even imagine being on the home front. And how did that unfold? Was it a phone call that you got, and how did you manage that?
It's one of those, you read about people and they talk about dramatic events, read from people. They talk about dramatic events and they say it was like a dream. They don't remember all the different things that happened. That was very much like that for me. Georgia has actually, our daughters actually, and Henry have reminded me of a few little bits and pieces along the way.
How old were they at the time?
I think Georgia was
13.
Yeah, 2008. Yeah, 13. Yep. So Henry would have been 9.
Mhm.
Yep. So old enough to definitely old
Absolutely.
enough to know what was going on. There were school holidays and it was pizza night, and just had the pizzas delivered, sitting at the table in our pajamas, and Harry called bizarrely, and I actually went to sort of have a rant to him about something, I don't know, and you interrupted me and said, look, so I'm okay, but, and then when he said that, I sort of went, okay, what's happened? And he told me there'd been an accident and he was okay and he was being taken to Kandahar, I think, at that stage. And then it all sort of went from there, and he said there'll be some people coming around, so let them in, because there'd been some stories of, I don't know, I guess Defence have experimented with a whole lot of different ways of doing notifications.
Yeah, delivering that news.
Yeah. And there have been some over the years where people just haven't answered the door if they see someone there. So that was actually really good.
But it was a very modern approach to it. But I was in a position to be able to ring Dan. So when I got back to TK emergency, I was shuffled into the emergency ward tent, or no, actually, I think it was a building, and I can't remember the guy who was running the show at that stage passed me the phone, and just said, "Hey, we think you should ring," and I said, "Yeah, it sounds like a really good idea," So, there have been some horror stories over the years, and it's not Defence's fault. Defence really cop a bad, but there is no great way.
Yeah, there's no way of
to
doing it.
deliver a message like your husband's been killed or lost a leg, or so. But you did have an insight into that, because was it Matt who so that you can you can empathise with someone who might just get a uniformed person turn up.
Yeah, in a heartbeat. So I got the call, and even just the words like "I'm okay, but." So what does "I'm okay, but"? Does that mean I've only lost one leg, not two legs? Does it mean what does it mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that he was talking to me, I thought that's got to be a good sign. And then I thought the first person I should call was your dad, so I called your dad, and then I think I called my mum, and before I'd even had time to change out of my pajamas, there was a knock on the door, and a very good friend of ours had arrived with somebody else that I can't even remember who that was.
Might have been the Padre, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it was the Padre.
Was it?
No, but they came over, and it was a little bit awkward because I was still in my pajamas, and actually asked them if it was okay if I went and changed. But yeah, they couldn't really give me any more information, just that he was alive and his injuries weren't serious at that point, because at that stage they weren't. It was only later that things got a bit more serious. And I think, overall the experience was just weird. I do remember going to bed and being so exhausted because it was a really emotional thing, and I don't think I'd experienced that sort of emotional fatigue. But I remember going straight to sleep, and so did the kids. So we must have felt okay. We couldn't have been that distressed at that stage. It was sort of only in the coming sort of next 3 weeks that things got more difficult.
Because that incident in 2008, that was fatal for one member in your vehicle.
Yeah, Sean McCarthy was killed sitting literally where you are, or standing that far away.
Do you need to talk through that story?
No, I don't think so. The vehicle I was driving hit an IED. Sean was killed instantly from the blast. Our interpreter lost both his legs, and the other two of us in the vehicle suffered, superficial wounds. Really, a broken hand and arm, and I had some blast and frag to the back of the legs, which then I could have stayed in country and recuperated for a couple of weeks, and then and got back on with business. But I contracted an infection. And I say superficial because it was. I just even feel now in the scheme of things, and a shout out to Dave and Mary, Sean's parents, who I love dearly. It's even now I feel like an imposter talking about it, because a guy died and another one lost his legs. So
you were very angry at the time.
But being sent home was terrible. So there was a bit of that when I got home. But I agree. When I got home, that's when it got real, because the infection wasn't going away. And I discussed openly with the doctor, Clay Gollage, that he said, we might have to remove your leg if it gets too bad, and it was getting worse all the time. So, and I think that evening with the kids and the pizza, and I had this red man syndrome from the drugs I was on. My hair was itchy and falling out, and
so no one could quite work out what the infection was, what the bacteria was. So different antibiotics were being used, and we were lucky to have Clay Gollage. He's an amazing infectious disease doctor. But that it was very weird. So I was just given the time and date to that Harry was coming in. So in my naive mind, I just thought, oh great, I'll clean out the car and we'll go to the airport and pick him up and we'll just bring him home. But I didn't realise that he was on IVs and he was in a wheelchair, and Defence were going to take him to the hospital. And so it was sort of really only until then, because nothing was talked about. The infection hadn't been talked about with us until that time. So,
and what was your community connection like at that time? Did everyone rally? Military spouses rally together? What about ESOs? Were ESOs involved in helping out at the time?
Not really.
ESOs weren't a thing.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, in 2008-9, the RSL was it. There wasn't a bravery trust. There wasn't a welfare trust of this sort or whatever. There was. I'm probably being disloyal to people who were around, but it was the regiment, the resources trust. At the unit.
Yeah, I think. Because Harry was still serving, it was an injury that happened while he was serving, there was an assumption that Defence was doing what it was supposed to do. The communication probably could have been a little bit better, but certainly friends and family, if for me as a teacher it couldn't have happened at a better time because it was school holidays. So I didn't have to worry about, lesson plans for my classes that I wasn't going to be there for, and it gave the kids a little bit of time to recover and get sorted. Ready for to go back to school. But we had a few friends that managed to. We sort of redirected calls and inquiries to them so that I could sort of concentrate on, keeping the kids busy, and so that was really good. So I think they fielded a lot of the the inquiries, if you like, on our behalf, and. And then eventually.
Actually, we had Legacy. Was it Legacy that we went to the Gold Coast with?
It was Rotary.
Yeah, Rotary had a
like a wounded soldiers.
Yeah, wounded soldiers. We went up to the Gold Coast, which was okay, which was nice.
Yeah,
nice
later in the year that was.
But at the time, the regiment wasn't great. The support wasn't great, but it was what it was, and they'd been through through a few woundings and guys being killed. But who was there was, for us at that time, the ESO was the Resources Trust, the SAS Resources Trust. The RSL in WA has always been a little bit fledgling. It's not as vibrant and alive as it is here in Melbourne, but it's much better now. They're quite a dominant force so through all, we were part of the learning of all this.
The beginning phases of the change.
Yeah.
At the time, Harry, am I right in saying that you had already started studying psychology when this accident happened?
Yeah, I had started, but and again inspired by Danielle, but yeah, I'd already started, and that was I guess a continuation on.
Yeah. So was this always part of a very big grand scheme of your eventual transition out of service?
Well, that period really made me reflect on my responsibility to Dan and the kids, to family. I took great comfort. We were never going to be broke because Dan's a professional, amazing human being without me. Probably more amazing without me at times, but I think I never had. Yes, it wasn't really kind of or what happens if I won't be able to provide, because I thought, but you've got to have a sense of purpose and something to do next. But it certainly did galvanise. What if the leg goes? What do I do? Where do I go? What's my next thing? So I think more the identity that's attached to being a psychologist started to come into view for what's next.
Because, of course, I mean, you did continue to serve for many, many years after that incident.
Yep.
Dan, how were you feeling at that stage? Were you kind of wanting Harry to get out of it already, or?
I think I was comforted by the fact that he seemed to realise that he wasn't going to be able to keep doing it forever. Leg or missing leg or not missing leg. He still wasn't. Your body's not capable of doing that.
Close to doing it forever.
You did. You did. You tell yourself that, do you? But Harry's always in a little bit of denial with those sorts of things anyway. Even now, his confidence in his own body is extreme, and it's held up pretty well. But I think even he realised at that point, I'm one of the oldest dudes here. I need to start thinking about what else I'm going to do. And I mean, as he said, we were never going to be poor because I was always going to be able to have a way of bringing in, of feeding and clothing the family. But you recognise that, I don't think your self-esteem would ever allow you to not work as well. I think you'd always want to do that. Yeah.
So after almost 30 years, I think it was, of service, is that right, Harry?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You then became a registered psychologist.
I did.
And, I mean, between the two of you now, you've started up this incredible business, Stoughton Group.
Yep.
Tell me what that journey for you was like, of Harry moving out of service and then, I guess, entering civilian world together.
Probably bigger than any challenge while he was in the army. And any civilian partner will tell you the same thing, is that I think when you've been in the army, your standards are phenomenally different, and learning to accept that the civilian world doesn't work that way is really, really difficult, because Harry's biggest frustration is, I don't understand why this person hasn't got this done, in the army that, it would have been done by now.
Yeah.
And, so that's been a very, very challenging thing, because that obviously started at the same time. So we started working together after he got out. So all of that was sort of a learning curve all at the same time, start of COVID.
We started our business on February 20, was it?
We had a business launch February 20, 2020.
Lockdown,
Yeah,
so.
2 years of rolling lockdown.
That's it. Yeah, working on Zoom. I didn't meet our first employee face to face for I think 9 months after we hired him.
Yeah.
But my biggest regret, I reflect back on dragging you to Melbourne for a few years and then staying and starting the business, and I've kind of, in a way, I've promised Dan that this part of our life's about her, and then I've gone on to make it all about me or us, so I've tried to rope her in. But it's been fun experience, We're at a stage of life. We've been married for 27 years now, and it's the greatest asset
28.
that I've got. 28 years, yeah.
In fact, I think it's 29 years tomorrow.
Is it? Yeah.
Or the day after, Sunday.
After,
Almost 29 years. Yep.
Yep.
And so, but it's been a good adventure, and we're getting close to putting the queue in the rack and what's next, but we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Long way to go yet.
Long way to go.
I have discovered that whether you're in love or in relationship or in work, I don't think we're manifestly different people. We're pretty authentic people I probably have a lower tolerance than Dan. Dan's a bit more patient, a bit more, but only just.
Only just.
Only just. But it's been good fun. I've enjoyed that as well.
Yeah,
And,
we're good friends. So that the adjustment of working together, while it can be really challenging, it's because we're friends that it actually works. Yeah, we both want other people to see the good things about that person.
Yeah.
So
we knock off and go to the pub with each other more than anyone else. So.
Yeah, we did do that earlier during COVID, though, if you remember.
Do you give each other annual reviews?
We should.
Yeah, I ask for annual reviews.
He asks for them, but that doesn't mean that he listens.
I'm better at receiving feedback than she is.
In the midst of all of this.
Can I say, so one thing just flowed in my mind. One thing when we were going through the times of deployments and rolling deployments, etc., Dan introduced me to this, I think this fantastic takeaway for partners in anything, in life. It's a philosophy, and that's the reset. Right? And Dan didn't know what it. So we would argue or fight or have a disagreement with the kids, or there'd be disruption in the house, or one of the kids was playing up, and Dan's. One time, I can't remember when it was, but it was just we need a reset. So we're going to the pub, and that's become a bit of a thing for us. We haven't probably used it as much recently because we're getting along really, really well. And
don't jinx
things.
it, yeah.
But that was something. Talk me through that. Was it deliberate, or where did that come from? You even texted me at times and just go reset and that meant Palmer and at
you
the
just
pub.
Knew.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think maybe from teaching, I guess. So kids need fresh starts all the time in the classroom to save face, to re-engage. They know they've got to be there. They can't get out of it, but sometimes it's hard for them to come back in. So you need to sort of show them that we can go for a fresh start, come back in. Maybe we'll deal with your behaviour later on, or something like that. So Harry, maybe we'll deal with your behaviour later on, but we can have a reset. Yeah, and it's just a neutral thing. Half the time we'd end up talking about the kids anyway, or stuff related to home. But it allows you to sort of go back in and not sort of feel like you're giving in. Yeah, it's got to be like we've got to be on an equal footing. Like neither of us are giving in or admitting that we're wrong, but we're going to reset and then
start again.
Maybe we'll talk about it later, maybe we won't.
Yeah. Yep. And I do inherent in that is that saving face, coming along. It's not about saying sorry or someone winning or not. It's just like, all right, it happened. We just need to get up and crack on, and it's not terminal, and it's not, So,
Great advice, absolutely. In the midst of everything, Harry decided to write a book, 11 Bats. It's a fantastic book. And
available in all fine bookstores.
Yes. And I'm just interested to know, Dan, I think you gave him space at one stage to allow his writing to come out. He went off, I think, was it to England?
Yeah, let's be clear, Aileen. He took it. I didn't give him it.
No, it was a negotiated outcome.
It was a negotiated outcome, yes.
Was that an important process for you both? I mean, I'm assuming writing that, Harry, was in some way cathartic for you, and Dan, you saw the importance of that process unfolding.
Yep, definitely. So I knew he'd made a start on it, but I also knew that he needed a big space of just sort of nothing so he could engage and start writing. And because I'd actually watched him write his masters as well, and I could see I don't work the way he does. I wouldn't write the way he writes, which is just you just purge. You just do it you'll do 8 hours without coming out. I don't understand how that's your way, but that was sort of what you needed. So I think I can't remember how many weeks you asked for initially, but negotiated outcome of I think 7 weeks.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I think it was
8 weeks.
All in,
I wasn't impressed because I
2
just
months
spent
walking around England writing a book.
Yeah,
cricket.
and in my head, I thought he's just at the local Bull Inn, watching cricket on whatever. Which look, he did at some stage, but he also came back with a pretty ripping book. So
100,000 words,
absolutely.
But I mean, that's again, it just goes to testament to Dan that I've asked for this ridiculous. Been away for 8 months a year on average for the last 15 years, and then I say I just need 2 months more, and I can get a book out of this and share. And I am full of zany ideas. Dan just goes, "Oh, what harebrained scheme?" Even George is like me. We said, "What harebrained scheme are Harry and George are up to now?" But we wrote that together. Honestly, Dan edited it at least twice. I did it a few times as well, and then final edit. So I think for both of it was a really nice experience. Dan said to me so many times, this makes me really proud of my service. When we go out for dinner, and I'm not a gong wearer, right? I don't like wearing my gongs, and I don't know what that is, but it's just
Just to be clear, medals.
The medals, yeah. And so I wear a badge or two or something like that, but she'll say put them on because they're mine as well. And so I wear them now with honour because I think that's who I'm representing, and it kind of reminds me, nation and all that type of stuff. But I wish that I wish that our partners were given some accolade or some acknowledgement. The partners. And Dan did it well, but there's so many out there who struggle with two kids below 2 years old or 3 years old or 3 kids, and they're not only that, they're in Perth,
they're
the other side of the country, from Townsville. They got no support.
Other countries even.
Yep. Other countries. They come from other countries, from international postings and stuff. So, that element's shouldn't go unrewarded, and unfortunately it does, and it's always a postscript.
It just kind of makes me think, as much as Harry was serving, you were serving in your own way, in supporting him, and without that, that couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Kudos to you.
Absolutely.
You're a better person than I am.
Thanks,
truly.
Oh, you would have done it.
And I just also have to know, your actual name's Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we call you Harry?
It was a nickname given to me by my mates on SAS selection, actually. Okay. Ken Studley gave it to me, and it's just in a reference to a dirty ditty from Rodney Roode. So I won't say
you don't want to know else.
Okay.
No.
It's not that bad. But Dan calls me Anth. Okay. We call ourselves Danth if we ever have a song, if we ever have a band together.
Yeah, that's a grade celeb status right there.
Yeah,
Danth.
yeah. But it is a challenge, Harry. If I called him Anth now, you'd sort of be saying who?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is that? So in most company, I'll call him Harry.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, some lessons moving forward for couples who are, to make it almost 30 years through what you guys have been through, what are the takeaway messages?
Reset. I reckon that's kind of, it really is. You're going to fight, you're going to argue, and you're going to be challenged, no matter whether you're in deployment. But I think in and around deployments, the reset and routine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reset and routine is really good. The other one I would say may even be more important than that, particularly for partners, is to claim your space. And it's hard to claim your space sometimes, because sometimes I think people like Harry are big personalities and they take up a lot of space. So it's really important to take your own, and sometimes you might have to work around the other person a little bit. But I think claiming your space is really important as well in any situation, whether you're married to an SAS operator or whether, you're married to an engineer or a lawyer or anybody, makes no difference. Yeah.
But particularly in those long deployments, having an identity outside of my identity was critical for you.
Yeah.
And we were talking to Walesy earlier. Yeah. And just making sure you've got something outside of service, that kind of third thing. But for partners, it's not all of you either. So fight for your identity. I think that keeps you grounded.
And your third thing, you might not be able to have a third thing that's outside the home. So for me, I was so busy running around for cricket and dancing and music and all those sorts of things. So my third thing had to be at home. So I love gardening still do. So that was what I could do. That was the third thing that fitted into my life because Harry was away a lot. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah.
And it still is.
We're lucky. I'm certainly lucky, but we're lucky to have each other, and I think there is a bit of that, but it's bloody hard work. Dan's really hard work. You know, I've had to really work hard to put up with her all these years.
Taking that with a pinch of salt.
Yes, throw it away.
You guys are absolutely gorgeous. Love chatting to you both, and what an amazing insight into almost 30 years of marriage. And thank you for sharing and being so candid, and gorgeous kids and everything.
Thanks, Els. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was everything I had imagined it was going to be. I've wanted to talk to you both in a room for so long.
All you had to do was buy us a beer, you know.
I did, yeah, almost. And just hearing Dan's insights into almost 30 years of marriage that she's put up with you.
Yep.
And just her backbone in the family, keeping everything ticking over when it was a matter of almost life and death, her sheltering you from information at home so you could concentrate on doing what you needed to do on deployment.
Absolutely. And, you know, you can go to your grave with a sandy beret and a military career and some gongs, but she'll go to her grave with our family as testament to her body of work and her life. And I just reiterated in me that I've won the lottery with Danielle, and I love hearing her point of view, and it was really warmed my heart.
The love and respect between the two of you is really evident.
Thanks, Alice.
And I think when you said about wearing your medals, and the reason behind wanting to wear them is in as much tribute to Danielle's service, so to speak, just gave me goosebumps.
I'm glad. It's the least I can do. She's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing.
No worries. My pleasure. Our pleasure.
If this podcast episode raises any concerns for you, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. If you're a current or ex-service member of the ADF or a family member of a veteran or someone who's currently serving, you can access free and confidential 24/7 support from Open Arms, Veterans and Families Counselling on 1800 011 046. Current serving members of the ADF and their families can also contact the All Hours Support Line on 1800 628 036 for confidential support. RSL Victoria is here to provide assistance and support to past and present service personnel and their families. Importantly, you don't have to be a member of the RSL to receive assistance from RSL Victoria. You only have to be a current or former member of the Australian Defence Force, our allies, or a dependent of either group. To access RSL support, you can reach out to your closest RSL sub-branch or contact RSL Victoria's Veteran Central Service on 1300 MILVET, 1300 645 838.